3 million seems to be a magic number because you could buy a lot with it. And in this video, we're going to talk about 3 sales in the collectible hobby that went over 3 million this week. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we got to talk about the number 3 million because 3 million seems to be able to get you a lot in the collecting world. And there were a few sales that happened this week, all hitting that sort of $3 million threshold. So in this video, we're going to kind of do like sort of a news roundup or a weekly roundup. There's a lot of interesting stories that are kind of surfacing around this number, and I kind of wanted to just talk about all of them. But before I get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, do one of those things, I would appreciate it. But let us get into the news here today. And kind of like I was saying, I'm just going to kind of go through some of the interesting stories that occurred this week. Maybe you guys already heard about them, and maybe you guys didn't hear about them. So let this be the video that kind of brings you that awareness. So as you can see right here, this is an article from Hypebeast. Comic with first appearance of Superman sells for 3.18 million USD. That right there is, of course, the first appearance of Superman, Action Comics #1. You guys know this book very, very well. This one is a 6.0 grade with white pages, no less. And it actually has this rocket stamp right here, which I guess came back from the 40s or so. Somebody had stamped it. And let's kind of talk about this book right here and the recent sale for it. So 1938 marked the year where Superman, the Superman character first made his appearance in the comic book world of Action Comics #1. Now a copy of Action Comics #1 has hit the auction blocks, selling for 3.18 million USD. The comic is now the third most expensive comic book ever purchased. The sale was brokered by Golden Auctions on behalf of its private client. This particular copy of DC Comics titled the Rocket Copy because it features a rocket stamp placed there by a 13-year-old who purchased the issue from the newsstand in 1938. The copy has received a 6.0 CGC grading. Other Action Comics that have sold for more were graded at an 8.5 CGC rating that achieved the 3.25 million USD at auction in April of 2021, while one which was graded at 9.0 sold for 3.2 million back in August of 2014. And that's really the little piece of information that I think is really interesting as far as talking about this sort of news cycle and what this means for comic books, because everybody had been talking last year that the market was going absolutely insane. Like we all know that April of 2021, some of the biggest record sales were going on in comic books, and at that time one of those sales was that Action Comics #1 at the 8.5 grade, which sold for $3.25 million. But what I think is interesting about referencing it here today is that here we are in January of 2022. We don't really know what's going to be happening with the comic book market going into this year. A lot of people are thinking that the market has totally corrected, or the market has even crashed in some places, and that comic book sales are totally going to be falling off the cliff. But what I think is really interesting is that you see an 8.5 copy sold for that amount of money at the height of the market, which was April of 2021, and now we are here in January 2022, and a lower grade is basically selling at around that same price. So you can almost make the argument that the 8.5 copy sold for less than it should have, or at least right now would be even more valuable. Perhaps it would be 3.6 million if it were to sell today here in 2022. So that's really interesting as far as what the state of the market is. I mean, granted, that's just an Action Comics #1. That's sort of like looking at the Dow Jones and making an estimation on the state of the economy. We can't, there's so many other factors in play, but it is really interesting to think about because a lot of people had been saying that 2022 is going to be a down year for comic books, but that number right there suggests otherwise. So really interesting on that front. But speaking of big record sales, the other things that we got to talk about that happened this week, of course, are the Secret Wars #8 original art sale that sold for 3.36 million. This is a bleeding cool article, so let me just kind of quickly read through it. But Secret Wars #8, Spider-Man black costume / Venom art hits record $3.36 million. So let me kind of just read through this article here. This just might be the most shocking auction result I've ever witnessed, and that says something. The original artwork for story page 25 of Secret Wars #8, the interior page, which serves as the origin of Spider-Man's symbiotic black costume, has just sold for an incredible $3.36 million at Heritage Auctions. Spider-Man's black costume was originally revealed revealed in Amazing Spider-Man 252, but with little explanation or backstory. The events that explained the change happened in Secret Wars number 8, which of course you guys know that. The saga of Spider-Man and the symbiote unfolded over several subsequent years, and this particular story page from Secret Wars number 8 can ultimately be considered as the origin moment of Venom. The page is credited by Heritage as by Mike Zeck and others as inkers John Betty, Jack Abel, and Mike Esposito all worked on this issue, though it is unclear who worked on this particular page. The story was scripted by Jim Shooter. So of course you guys know this is the interior page for Secret Wars number 8, the original artwork that was used to create all the prints. This piece right here just sold for $3.36 million. And that's really interesting to me. I mean, I feel like original artwork is sort of a subset of comic book collecting that I think is really, really interesting. And I would actually love to do more videos about original comic book art. You know, I'm only slowly starting to learn about it, but I know a lot of people that are really passionate about this subset of collecting. And I would love to maybe bring them on a channel or do more videos with them and talk about this stuff, because I think it's a really interesting space. And I think with a sale like this is going to bring a lot of attention to the original art collecting world. I can imagine sort of a gold rush of collectors looking to this space, knowing that the numbers for the original art pieces are going for this high. Just to put it into perspective for some of you guys, this I thought was really interesting. For more apples to apples comparisons, previous record prices for comic book interior story artwork include the May 2014 sale of the final page of Incredible Hulk 180 featuring the debut of Wolverine, which sold for $657,250. So basically $600K compared to, you know, what we see now in $3.3 million. That was, of course, you guys know the panel in 180 that features Wolverine. So this is pretty crazy. This is like sort of new territory that we're kind of looking at with, you know, the original comic art sale. I mean, we're talking about, you know, not even what is effectively the first symbiote appearance, but rather the one that came in Secret Wars number 8. I mean, it's an absolutely stunning panel. It's one of the all-time greats, but it's really interesting to think about how that book right there sells for a price that is almost around the level that you could get that 9.6 Amazing Fantasy 15. But ultimately, it doesn't actually feel that shocking to me. I mean, I feel like, you know, those books that came out in the 80s and the Copper Age and the Late Bronze and things like that, I mean, the people who have money today who are nostalgic for those things are willing to, you know, buy crazy collectibles or crazy comic book stuff. I mean, look, if I was a billionaire, I would definitely be, you know, throwing around my money, picking up all of these collectibles. So I don't actually think that it's that crazy. But that being said, you know, we do have to sort of, you know, at least put our tinfoil hats, you know, nearby within reach, because there have been a lot of discussion of market manipulation and things like that going on in the market. I'm not saying that this is market manipulation. I'm sure that there's a passionate collector who wants to own that particular interior page. I mean, it is a one of one, but we do have to sort of at least float the idea, especially when we talk about the third story, which we have to talk about, you know, hovering around that $3 million range, which of course is the Logan Paul story. Last month, Logan Paul purchased a bunch of sort of original Pokemon cards. You know, for those who don't know, there's a lot of craze within the Pokemon card world where people like to collect, you know, the sort of those original Charizards and Pikachus and things like that, especially if you can land those PSA 10. So Logan Paul had purchased some unopened boxes that, you know, potentially he could have ripped open and possibly pulled one of those Charizard cards, which of course sell for whatever, millions of dollars now or whatever the case may be. But he had actually purchased this box. It was sealed and verified by BBCE, who is a company that kind of verifies these like boxes as being, you know, not tampered with and things like that. But of course, when they actually did rip them open, this was on his channel, on his video, they ended up being loaded with G.I. Joe 1991 cards. So it was total manipulation, or it was a total scam, which is definitely a shame. I mean, I definitely couldn't help myself and chuckle a little bit when I watched the video, because it's like, it's so dramatic and it sucks so bad. But for the state of the hobby industry, the collecting industry, and like a company like BBCE, it's definitely a red flag towards it. I mean, it feels like, you know, with the FUD and the market manipulation and all this stuff that happens within collectibles, it definitely causes a ripple in our industry, which overall is a negative thing in my opinion. But even with that negativity, one of the things I think is really interesting that I thought was funny is I want to show you guys this, you know, and this is sort of like what we talk about with market manipulation and the effect of like sort of these sort of big record sales and big numbers being kind of like a PR machine for a specific book or collectible or whatever the case may be. So, obviously we get the news that Logan Paul pulled a bunch of G.I. Joe cards when he thought they were Pokemon. And I just kind of wanted to show you guys, like, look at the effect that this has on the collectible market. So here's January 11th. These are sold items on eBay. This would have been before, we got, Logan Paul's video, right? Which I think came out on the 13th or 14th. So just to give you guys an idea, like here's how many sales. I just did G.I. Joe 1991 trading cards. And basically what we see on January 11th is we see, one thing, two things, and January 11th, three things right here. Here's a box, that sold for 50, and that's about it, right? We go to January 12th, we see one thing, two things, three, no, just two. So basically we're getting the sense that like just days before, right? Maybe you see a couple sales, maybe as many as three. Now we get to the 13th. Let's count how many G.I. Joe trading card things sold in the wake of this Logan Paul thing. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And by the way, this is now selling for 80. Remember, it was selling for 50 back then. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. I don't know if that's actually a card. 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37.
2 hours later.
51, 52, 53, 54. Okay, you guys get the idea. I really don't need to count this. But we're here January 13, 13, 13, 13, 13. We're still in 13th. Everything is selling right here. And we finally get to January 14th now. And of course, there still are sales going on January 14th. So this is totally crazy to me that, this sort of news cycle right here and this PR for Logan Paul's pull would generate that many sales for G.I. Joe cards. And that's kind of where people talk about, when it comes to sort of market manipulation or people doing like shield bidding and things like that. That's where we as collectors who are just like, the regular collectors, we have to be aware of the effect that it has on our FOMO. Now, again, I don't think that this is Logan Paul thing is like market manipulation or any of these sales action comics or Secret Wars or whatever is manipulation in any kind of way. I'm just demonstrating to you guys that what happens when you have these big record sales is that it generates that PR machine within the market. So you have to remember that just because there's a record high massive sale for a particular item doesn't mean there's now this huge opportunity for you to make a ton of money by investing in items that sort of relate to that. So, I think people are very excited about G.I. Joe cards. Maybe it's going to cause a little flurry for G.I. Joe cards, but I very much doubt that it's going to cause like a new boom within that particular collectible. So that's really interesting and something you got to be aware of. And similarly, when we talk about the record sale for Secret Wars 8 here, I was like thinking to myself, let me look up and see what, some of the recent sold Secret Wars books actually are in the wake of this. Now I did actually go through to count, all the January 14th sales. And I think that there were about like 20 books that went coming off the heels of that announcement. But this is a book that moves quite often. So it's not like it was a massive spike up. Like I think in the days before, generally speaking, it does sell around like, 12 to 15 copies or so. So there was a little bit of a spike. But what you do see that I think is really interesting is a new record for certain books at certain grades. So here's a CGC 9.4. This sold for $300. If I pull up the GPA analysis and I go down to the 9.4 grade, just even at a quick glance, you can see that the record high was 280. So this already has caused a new record high for a 9.4 Secret Wars number 8. Similarly, I think that there is a 9.8 that sold just right here. Yep, around the $800 range. Now that is not a record high, but generally speaking, in comparison to where it was currently sitting in the market, this has given the book a nice little spike. So you can see right here in 2022, it was selling for $725, $780, $680, $710, $702, etc. Now we see one go for $800. Of course, there was one $800 earlier, but it is interesting to think about, like, instantly that made someone want to buy it now off of eBay. So it'll be interesting to track the trajectory of this book and see what kind of new peaks it can hit in the wake of its original art being sold at this. Because again, people are going to be excited that, this original piece of art is the #1 selling art in the comic book collecting world, and that's going to put a new perceived value on this Secret Wars 8 book. So again, for collectors out there, or for people like you and me, if this is driving your FOMO to want to pick up, some G.I. Joe cards or one of these books, I mean, just use caution, use discretion, make sure that it's something that you actually want, and make sure that you get, a proper price on it. So anyways, that is all for this video. That was just me kind of talking about these sort of 3 news stories that I think were really interesting, hitting that $3 million range. Let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think is the most interesting story that came out this week? If you had $3 million, what would you guys rather have? That original art or an Action Comics 1? Or perhaps, let's just pretend that Logan Paul actually was getting those Pokemon cards. Anyways, drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I will see you in the next video.